This week's Millennial Affirmations. I am confident that I survived the 2016 election. I am not confident that this isn't hell. I am calm when I hear Mariah Carey singing All I Want for Christmas before Thanksgiving. I am exercising self-control when I spy Halloween candy on a deep sale. I am at peace with my feelings about Steve Kornacki. I am a leaf on the wind, falling like a hanging chad.
Welcome to Once in a Generation, the podcast where being a millennial means knowing every vote counts. But some votes count a lot more than others. Looking at you, Florida.
We're your hosts. I'm Chase, he, him.
Liv, she, her.
And Katie, she, her.
Each episode, we unpack the mess that is our generation, trying to understand the question, was it ever really supposed to work out for us?
Because being part of the most resilient generation means having favorite self-care routines for yourself and your community during constitutional crises. All of them.
This is Once in a Generation. Let's unpack the damage.
This week, we're taking Liv back to November 2000, when two hosts were 13 years old and democracy got weird in real time. While Liv was probably blissfully unaware that elections could just not end. Actually, we're not sure where Liv was doing. Maybe getting her Harry Potter participation trophy that she talked about in episode 2.
We're walking through what it was like to experience the 2000 election as the first major political moment for elder millennials. The hanging chads, the Brooks Brothers Riot, the 36 days of uncertainty. I still can't believe it was both more and less. It seemed like a long time. The Supreme Court decision that ended it all, and the lasting trauma of knowing anyone who votes third party ever after.
Katie, do you want to take us through some of the things? Because Liv has this blocked out or doesn't remember.
Fourth grade was awful in like every conceivable way for me personally. And I am someone who, I just memory hole things a little bit. And so I was also like very, very slightly too young to really notice anything. It wasn't until 9/11 happened that I even sort of like noticed lawn signs. So this just wasn't like a beat for beat thing in my life. And also Fox News didn't exist, I think, to the extent it exists. Definitely not to the extent it exists now, but my parents hadn't become Fox News people yet. That would happen between this election and Bush 2, which I do remember a lot of Bush 2 because I was exposed to a lot of Fox News between then and then.
The escalation between the 2000 election and the 2004 election with Fox News and the rhetoric around it, I think is also kind of like a direct effect of the instability we felt during the 2000 election. But what I think is so interesting about the 2000 election, so let's set the scene for a little bit. The oldest millennial would have been in high school, right? If you were born in 1981, you would have been in high school during the 2000 election. For the youngest of the older millennials, which would be around the 87, 89 cutoff period, we would have been just entering middle school or slightly before that. So this is the perfect time for older millennials to be going through social studies class, civics class, American history classes in their respective educational institutions. And therefore, the 2000 election was frequently used as this like teaching moment in a lot of classrooms. So we would go through like mock elections in the classroom, and we would learn all about multi-party systems versus, the history of the parties. So that is like the intention of what the 2000 election was supposed to be like for a lot of older millennials. And before that point, I think for most of us, I don't want to cut too broad of a swath, but like most of our political awareness was caught up in the Clinton administration and
Uh-huh.
specifically in the Clinton impeachment. Chase, I don't know if you would have anything you'd add on to that, but I think that's kind of like the basis for what our political understanding was going into the 2000 election.
Yeah, I think I had a weird time period situation where from 96 to 99, I lived in Australia. And so I was kind of removed from a large majority of that. But as we've discussed previously, my parents worked for the NSA. And so we were a political household. We talked about all of these things. So the 2000 election, I think, was almost like a boiling pot moment where I had the background, I had the history, and then I jumped back into the States and it all went haywire.
Yeah, and I think especially for a lot of us, like, this was the same time I was going to, like, middle school formals and, we were listening to, like, let's see, boy bands, Spice Girls, like, this was that period too, so imagine trying to hold the sort of, like, dual reality of, I'm just old enough to watch SNL or Comedy Central, right? Like, I've been watching South Park for, like, maybe 2 years at this point, and suddenly all of these forums, whether it's SNL, The Simpsons, South Park, Daily Show, are suddenly talking about politics in a way that I hadn't thought about before that point. Um, and so, like, it became this, like, saturated experience that I think all elections since have been, but I don't remember them being that way before then.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were of the age where I don't know if we would necessarily know the difference, but especially taking a look back and doing research, it's like this was, I think, the turning point for what we're seeing a lot today in the American political system.
This was also, like, one of the up until I'm this is totally, opinion here, but I think up until about Bernie Sanders, the last time there was, like, a real strong contender for a third party candidate,
Mm.
and so there was a lot of arguments around, Ralph Nader's, candidacy potentially spoiling the election, and even before that, like, he's still like, he got a bit on SNL when a lot of other, like, smaller independent party candidates would not have gotten that kind of national recognition. I remember in my social studies class, we were all joking around, and we decided we were gonna create our own candidate called, Al W. Nader, just, like, bringing all 3 candidates' names together in one. And we were gonna call ourselves the Republicrats because that's what nerdy 13-year-olds do.
I think to a certain extent, and I won't call this person specifically out, it was a parent of mine, voted for Nader. And I think there was a level of, in the 2000 elections, people were already a little upset with the two-party system. And so that felt like an exercise in ways to expand the political conversation, but it also was like I feel like the framework for 2016 of this spoiler candidate that isn't actually serious.
The timing of it is of all the elections really up until 2004 for me were so odd because of where my age hit. So 96 would have been pre-K maybe, and I didn't really super go to pre-K, and I literally just had to Google, like, who did Clinton even run against? And I'm like, I'm a political person, like, I'm a nerd about this stuff, and I'm still somehow just like, because I didn't live through it, I did live through it, but I had no
You were
memory of it.
alive.
Yeah, I was alive. I was 5 whole years old, and, like, don't remember that being in school at all. You used to see people you'd have, like, a cute little student vote, which apparently has become less and less common after 2016, which I understand. I understand why that would be. Um, but then with, the year 2000, I keep thinking, like, I must have done there must have been something in school in one way or another, but I was in, like, deep, deep, deep conservative red Georgia, so there just wasn't I think that there were, like, there were 7 Democrats in my town and me, and, like, they weren't even, like, enough people to get a special at Subway for, like, a really long sub. You had to get the individual ones because the party subs were just too much. Um so there really just wasn't like, it was just so one-sided that nobody really argued or, like, fought about it, which has been one of the most interesting things moving out of the South into places that are and especially leaving Georgia right before it got more purple or a little bit more blue, has been really fascinating to hear from people who lived in states where there was just more going on. It wasn't totally as one-sided, that I do think that changes how much you might have been talking about it at that time. That if I was in 4th grade, regardless what was happening that year, and I was in a battleground state, there might have been more conversation around me rather than just, we're gonna vote for Bush. So why are we even I remember the bumper stickers on my parents' cars being there forever. I think they found more Bush 2000 stickers to put on after 9/11 too. Like, they found additional
Mm.
ones. Or I could just be confusing the 2004 election, entirely possible. But it was all so read that there almost like wasn't as much discourse, I think, as there might have been in other places, or even more further in towards Atlanta.
Yeah.
Well, I think, George Bush really swept the election in a way that we're not going to talk about here because we are not political historians. And there's
No,
lots
Nope.
of other podcasts out there that'll
go
absolutely talk
elsewhere.
about that. We're going to talk about what we remember of it. But I do think that, like, in some ways, the 2000 election was sort of this precursor to what we felt in like 2016, or even again in the most recent election, where it was just like, I didn't
Mhm.
realize how much of the country felt this way.
Yeah.
Mm.
And the fact that that keeps happening, you would think we would learn, but we don't. But that's kind of tied to me. So like, I want to say it was maybe one season of West Wing had aired before Bush was elected. I can't quite
That's how we count the
remember.
years now.
Yeah.
I know, but like this was like going into the 2000 election. So we'd survived Y2K without the doomsday that people had been predicting. So there's this sense of like, oh, we are more capable than we thought we were. And they're like American President, like all of the Aaron Sorkin media in the film and television, it was everywhere. And so there's just this strong sense of like democracy is a living, breathing thing. And yeah, you would have Democrats versus Republicans, but like the sanctity of the Constitution would always triumph. And
There was a
I would hear,
discourse, at
yes.
least.
Yeah, or you would hear people talk about, like, I remember growing up hearing about Senator Robert Byrd from West Virginia, who
Mhm.
I do not agree with the majority of the politics that he endorsed most of his life, but he was someone that was referred to frequently as, like, a statesman, not a politician,
Yeah.
and he acquired rather a lot of pork barrel, benefits for his, state, so I don't know what that means exactly, but I think there was, like, I'm gonna fall into, like, stupid civility politics vocabulary there
And
here,
I'm gonna
but,
be
like,
over here yelling from Georgia corner going, "Not where I'm from." None of it
right,
felt
right,
like that. Not
but
ever at any point. There was
but
no
I think there was
civility.
this
There was
mythology of, like, the great political project of the states, and I think some of that was also, like, at least for me, my age, so I'm reading about, uh, the electoral vote versus the popular vote in textbooks that were, created in Texas by the Texas School Board, right? Because
Mhm.
Texas was, like, the biggest exporter of textbooks across the country.
What a
Um,
wild thing.
I know, it took me years to find out that that explained some of the things in my
Well, they
textbook.
made all of our instruments, so I had to
Which
assume.
is a very cool history, and if you get the opportunity, read a book about it. It's actually fascinating.
This is
But
why I
anyway,
can
I think there's just this, like, grand sense of, like, indomitable, like, democratic project in this country that
Yeah.
George Bush could not harm, even if we still felt robbed that he won the election.
Yeah. I feel like and this wasn't a new thing by any means. I mean, there were SNL caricatures of other presidents and all of those things, but I feel like the Will Ferrell Bush situation definitely turned a little bit of the tides when it came to that election.
It was like the first meme-ified election. I
Mhm.
mean, like,
Yeah.
people talked about gaffes from, like, the Clinton-Bush debate, but this was the first one where, like, Will Ferrell would sit and do, like, a mock debate in SNL and talk about things like strategery, which now people have, like, a Mandela effect thought about and think that, Bush actually said.
I
Um
did until you
Right.
said it.
We had a VHS at home of funny George W. Bush moments. Like,
What?
yes, this is the thing that I don't think you guys know how much material that was made about George W. Bush by Republicans. Um, we had a VHS, of funny George W. Bush moments. I don't remember what year this was, I just remember it existing, and I do know that the mission accomplished moment was on there, but presented unironically, completely unironically. Um yeah, I remember a lot, at the same point because my dad really loved SNL, and we were a family of, people who just never slept for some reason, and so I would end up seeing more of it than your average child should have, and hearing, seeing that impression, and then hearing either at school the next day or from my friends who were at the Christian school that I had just recently been to and then would soon go back to, talk about their parents talking about packing the Supreme Court and everything being around SCOTUS and everything being about the Supreme Court. And so at the same time, you had these like very funny caricatures and you had like merch and you had like him on TV and everything. On the other side, there was like Newt Gingrich in the wings just rubbing his hands together of like the plan is coming together. And we've
And
now
Dick
seen that like
Cheney
it did.
too, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Cheney as well.
But so much of that election, I don't literally the only thing I remember political wise anybody talking about was that Bush was going to be good for the Supreme Court. And that was like the project that I heard all the adults talking about.
Which you would figure, so, like, we're fast forwarding a little bit here, but, like, the Supreme Court is what gave the election to him
One
ultimately,
vote.
Right.
and they voted along their party allegiance, right? So anyone who says that Supreme Court is, like, unbiased, can't say that today for sure.
No.
But it's like, that set the tone for then Bush to, like, swing it even further. And now Trump's continuing the project, but we're not gonna talk about that today.
Oh, it's
We're
too much
not no, so
painful.
we have pre-election night vibes, which is the next item on the outline, otherwise we're just gonna have me repeating about how confused I am over and
But
over again.
first
What
a
was that like?
PSA,
Oh?
because this episode drops the morning of election day in many states. So anyone who's listening on the 4th, if you have not voted and you are somewhere in which an election, local, statewide, is being held, go vote. Go vote.
Please, dear God. I don't care who you vote for, but vote.
I
Don't
Like,
say
do.
that. We
show
do care who you vote
No,
I
I
for.
mean,
care
I
you
care I
What did
care
we
who
just
people
say
vote
about
for.
Nader?
I care who people vote for. Clearly, our allegiances are set. And also, it is your duty as an American to vote.
And if you're listening in New York, you have the opportunity to have a hot mayor. Do it. What if we just elected hot socialists? There's an opportunity for you to do this. And wouldn't that just be fucking hilarious? Like, in addition to good, also for the bit, very fun. So if you're like, maybe not, maybe I've got some fatigue, go back. Hey, we dropped an episode a little bit ago about how to kind of bounce, into fall. Like maybe hit that reset. Maybe go take that big shower, get that bad energy off, and then go vote. So this has
Vote
been
for
our
a hot socialist.
You do raise an interesting point where I'm trying to think about some of the better looking members of our government right now. And I'm like,
No.
I think being such an awful person eventually erodes the soul and it's evident on the face. That's just a personal ideology of mine. And so I'm like, ultimately, if you vote for the hot people, do you vote for the right people?
I mean, I'm not saying there are. I mean, in his heyday, Ronald Reagan was an attractive human being.
Maybe.
You don't think so? He was literally an
Okay, I
actor.
retract my statement. I'm
Yeah,
also thinking about how many people were like hot for Clinton,
You
and
can be
I'm
an
oh
actor and not hot.
don't Paul Giamatti me.
yeah. Meanwhile, Bernie is not hot, and yeah. Anyway, all right, I retract my theory.
There are hot people on both sides. Your face, Katie, was so worth it.
So, PSA done. Let's talk about election night. So these days, I feel like when we get ready for election night, everyone knows to like whether it's C-SPAN, not C-SPAN, well, maybe C-SPAN, but usually CNN, MSNBC,
IDC.
Fox News. You start watching the returns come in with a drink or many drinks in hand.
Katie hates ABC because she didn't mention it, but
I
Who
just don't
watches
associate
ABC?
ABC with politics for some reason. I associate them with Disney,
that's
which
fair.
is like not apolitical, but I don't know. The mouse shouldn't get to vote.
We're
Um,
all watching Kornacki. Let's not lie.
I was gonna say, I really am watching it for Kornacki and his khakis.
Yeah.
So, um, so the 2000 election was like the first one where we were really watching things come in real time. And not that they hadn't come in real time in previous elections, but it hadn't been this like 24-hour news spectacle that it turned into in 2000. That was really the first time. And part of that was through improvements in the voting process, which made it easier to call elections earlier on. And then the other part of that was just expanded news cycles and increased reportage resources. So there's a lot going into all of that. But it had now kind of turned into like destination viewing for a lot of people. in a way that it hadn't before. And yeah, I just have this very vivid memory of like sitting down to family dinner at the table and we all eat our food and we're like, okay, the polls have closed. Let's go sit in front of the television now and watch the returns, like dutiful Americans exercising our civic duty. And then it was awful after that. So, but sorry, I'm having a flashback while I'm relating the story. We were given because we were going through a whole like civil studies unit at school around the 2000 election. We were given worksheets printed out that we were told to color in as the votes came in. So we were tracking the election that night as part of our homework.
Wow, you're a nerd.
I am a nerd.
You couldn't
Um,
do that to children now because it would give them even worse anxiety because every
it would. But I mean, this
yeah.
was also like the same year that they had us like hurricane tracking and we would like plot the hurricane out on like little I went to a very interesting magnet school in Maryland. Basically, it was a magnet school for nerds. Um,
Are there
Are
other
there
kinds of
any other
magnet schools?
kinds?
well, but like there's like the not jocks, but like the hot nerds. This was a magnet school for the nerds.
Okay.
So anyway,
Also, I feel like there was a missed thing about people rewatching this election because his name is Gore. This is political gore porn of watching this terrible thing that happened to him.
yeah.
I mean, our calendar invite for this said Al Gore, like record Al Gore, and every time I thought it said record AI Gore, and I was like, that's probably what we're gonna do too.
I mean, that's very fitting for a guy who once said he invented the internet.
Yeah, yeah.
Which,
I
you
still
know,
believe he did. I still
speaking of
believe it.
internet
I
memes,
don't think you
like,
did.
It's a series of tubes.
And yeah. Where did we know that he invented the internet by the time the 2000 election happened? Was that like when did he
yes,
say
yes,
that?
yes.
Yes, I think he said that.
Because it was one of the
Okay.
things that SNL spoofed, where like George would be like, "I will use strategery," and then Gore would be like, "I invented the internet." Yeah, cool.
Still a held belief of mine.
Okay, so we did that, and then it became too close to call, right? So everyone is expecting sort of this real time reportage. I think in part, like I blame the news networks for this because they were
Oh, 100%.
creating this sense of safety in their reporting. Like we're going to know the results and we're going to report them to you in real time. Um, and then it was getting like too close to call, and so for those of us who had to go up, get up for school the next day, we ended up having to go to bed without knowing the results. But there were a number of networks that were calling Florida the like uh, final state that would decide the election for Gore and then for Bush. And then it was too close to call.
Uh-huh.
And then everyone was just like, who is our president? It was known very early on who the popular vote went for, like within 24, 48 hours, but not who the electoral vote went for. And so all of us as kids are sitting around being like, but Gore won. Like he won the popular vote.
More people
Why?
voted for him.
Right. So why are we still sitting around caring what happened in Florida?
I think whoa. There's so many things that we talk about where I'm just like, "Oh, I just got transported back." So my dad was a history teacher before he went into the military, into the NSA, and I just remember sitting down and having him explain the Electoral College to me, and me being like, "That's fucking stupid. Why do we do it that way?"
Meanwhile, the next year, before 9/11, I was taught in school, and this is why God has blessed the Electoral College, actually, because it was meant to be for
Whoa.
us to have this great Christian president. I actually didn't know the Electoral College was, like, problematic until 2016 when all of a sudden, like, when Hillary lost, and wait a minute, everybody's been complaining about this my whole life, and this is just on the list of things that I hadn't, like, followed up on yet. Like, I had so many other things I needed to follow up on for my awful education before that. But, yeah, no, it was like, here's why the Electoral College is amazing. Here's why the Supreme Court, like, this is the project. This election that had, like, just happened, this is proof of why. And I was like, cool, okay. And then we, like, quickly moved on because 9/11 happened. But that is, like, Yeah, that was how that was framed, was from after the 2000 election.
It was really interesting growing up with the parents that I did because they could never tell me anything, but I can tell by the way that they came home from work how things were going pre and post George Bush winning the election, and they were more sad. They were a lot more sad.
I think the thing was, like, we didn't realize how bad it could get under Bush, in a way that I feel like we can't say when Trump won, and so everyone was like, "Well, we have an idiot now in office," right? Like, just everyone was like, "I guess he's gonna call on Cheney and his dad to figure out how to run the country because we know he can't." Um, and then 9/11 happened, and it got a whole lot worse.
Yeah.
Uh
Those first 9 months of the Bush administration, like, what even I do think I watched a documentary one time that was just on that, because so much of it is just like, completely memory hold.
Well, and it the first 9 months, everything I remember about it being just sort of like sour grapes of like, "Okay, we really know it should be Gore, but also, like, how much damage can one dunce do?" Because Clinton left us with, a budget surplus and,
Mhm.
like, basically in the liberal circles that I was, like, listening to as a middle schooler, it was basically it's gonna suck under Bush, but it's not actually that bad except for the Supreme Court stuff because Clinton set us up in such a good position,
Mhm.
that, like, 4 years of having a clown in office and also the project of democracy in general was so strong that having Bush in office was like, "It's gonna suck, but it'll be okay." And it wasn't, and we learned how fragile things were.
Why does it feel like every single time a Democrat wins, it's like the class president that's in high school is like, "I'm gonna balance the budget. Yeah, I might, screw an intern, but, like, I'm gonna do smart things." And then the jock gets in power, like Bush, or I'm not saying Trump is a jock, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
The,
yeah,
like the, like
the
the
strong man
strong
gets
man comes in and just fucks it all up. Why? Why do we
Because in
keep
order to govern, you have to believe in government.
amen.
That's, like,
And
the simple.
like, specifically with Trump, but also I think with Bush and Cheney, like, there was a desire to pull in as much power as possible because it's just, like, a natural extension of their strongman politics, but also, like, the sort of, like, winner-take-all philosophy that was really starting to dominate, Republican rhetoric. So
Yeah.
Speaking of winner take all philosophy, I
so,
I thought
let's
I
talk
had a
about
good transition there.
there was
I
an
was going
excellent
to hanging
Hanging
transition.
chad, and then I
chads.
lost it.
So, let's talk about some vocabulary we learned.
Someone tell me what a pregnant chad is. That is
Okay, so
made up.
first of all, do you know what a chat is? And I'm
So,
not
okay,
talking about the bro at the gym.
my I do so I know what a hanging chad and a dimple chad is. So a
Okay.
hanging chad is so the way that they use are wait, hold on.
They're like basically pop scantrons.
So we have
Yeah.
to go even further back because there are
Yeah,
lots of
we have
people
to
who
talk about
never
optical
lived.
versus punch card
Right,
ballot.
who never lived
Oh,
in a time where ballots were paper. So
Yes.
no election I've ever been in, the ballot has been anything other than, like, optical scan. So that's where you're gonna
Yeah.
take take your pen or your pencil, you're gonna fill in the little dot, you put it in the thing, and you hope that works. Before that, at least in this election, I don't know if it was all elections, they had a piece of paper and there was, like, a stick, and then you stuck the stick through the thing to knock out the little piece of paper, and that was the Chad, that you for who you wanted to vote for. And so the hanging Chad was the Chad had fallen out of the hole, but was still
poor Chad.
attached, but at least for like a little bit. A dimpled Chad was like it looked like they pressed it, but it like hadn't gone all the way through or it hadn't come off.
And the pregnant Chad is so if you have a spectrum of, like, the dimpled Chad at the light end and then the hanging Chad at the, like, strong end, the pregnant Chad's in the middle where it's just indented further, but not hanging yet.
Oh my god. I thought it would be like two Chads stuck in one thing somehow.
No,
I
no,
thought
That's
it was
it's
too
like
gay
literally
for the
just like
yeah,
elections.
I was
it
like
was just degrees of how much it had been punched.
The degrees of
So
Chad.
for those who have not done manual ballots versus, like, digital ballots, because a lot of places now have, like, touch screens or, things like that. There's Scantron versions, which is always what I remember seeing my mom do when I would go with her to vote in Maryland. And so this was the other thing is so how ballots are done vary state by state and often even district by district. And so it wasn't just the Chads in Florida. That would be a great cover
We
band.
live there now.
Yeah, the Chads are running around all the time at the gyms across the street. But it was that so you could have an optical scan ballot, but sometimes they would do a thing where you could vote the top of the ticket. So I'm voting for Gore versus Bush, and then like just draw a line down, and it meant that you were voting like the Democratic Party the whole way. But then some districts, for whatever reason, switched it up. So like if you did a straight line down, it would like mess up who else you voted for because it wasn't actually an optical scan. So there's just like a lot of ballot illiteracy, I would say, state to state, district to district. And in Florida, you would take your piece of paper, you would slide it into the little like template thing. You would take your hole puncher, stab the ballot, and if you did it forcefully enough, the Chad would pop off. And so there would be no like little remaining piece of paper stuck to it.
Why
Um,
they thought that was a good fucking idea blows my mind to this day.
Florida. That's all I'm gonna say. Since moving here, I really understand. Like,
They're not sending
yeah,
their best.
no.
Oh yeah, I have a joke for this segment, but if I tell it, you have to promise not to include it in the episode.
I do not promise.
Katie, I need one of the two of you to promise.
I
I
don't know
mean,
what it
I'm the
is.
I'm the
Okay,
editor.
I was
okay,
gonna
just
say,
to
I
put it
don't know
in
how much
on my
control
LinkedIn.
I have.
Because like the thing about pregnant Chads, like the whole time I was looking at it is I was like, impreg is always possible, like even in the 2000
Aw,
election,
it's true.
always possible even with the ballot.
I was just thinking about how like woke and like trans inclusive they were to have a Chad be pregnant.
Right?
Men can get pregnant
True.
too.
Yep.
That's true.
So, anyway, the point with the hanging chads, the dimple chads, the pregnant chads is that the secretaries in the state will and the other officials overseeing elections will say, "Okay, we can kind of tell who this person intended to vote for," right? Like the chat is still attached, but it's clear that this person intended to vote for this person. Therefore, we will count the ballot towards that candidate. And that's like really rooted in this sort of like constitutional right of like you have a vote in the same way that, like, these days in Pennsylvania and other states, if they're trying to disqualify your ballot because, like, your signature isn't in the right place, you have it like, you're given a notice and you're given a certain amount of time to cure the ballot, and re-sign it so that you're not disenfranchised from your vote. So that was the spirit of trying to count all of these, like, hanging chads and dimpled chads. But then the army of lawyers that Bush and Cheney employed worked very, very hard to argue that these hanging chads and dimpled chads should not be counted. And in that, they reduced the number of votes that could be counted towards Gore. And they
Mhm.
didn't do this statewide, they did this in specific districts. And they typically tended to be in districts that would have voted more blue. So it was a very surgical approach.
I
One
think it
conspiracy theory I do know from this time. One fact and then the conspiracy theory is that because of the manual recounts of this type of ballot, because of the additional friction, more Chads like fell out.
Yes.
And so there might be like a hanging Chad where there was not before. There might be something that looks punched through, whatever. But the conspiracy theory part of it was that part of the lawsuits was to make them manually recount it more to add more and more ambiguity to that.
Well, because
Mhm.
that was the other thing is if you had 2 Chads coming out, like, one like, it looked suddenly like you voted for Bush and Gore, then the whole ballot got tossed out because that was, like, an invalid ballot. You can't vote for
Yeah.
both candidates, right? So, again, the manual recount could actually screw up the ballots. Um, and so the manual recount is, like because often they would, like, try to feed these through a machine that would read them, and that was why they would punch it out. And so then the manual recount was they would have to bring people in by hand. I feel like, in 2010, this was maybe not as well known nomenclature, but after 2020 and the most recent election, like people understand what a manual recount is.
Yeah. But I mean, I think that there's a reason that we brought up this topic set, not just for millennials, obviously, but this was the point in which I feel like our disillusion with the political system really came to the forefront. Like, I don't know if I realized how much what I learned then affected me now.
Yeah, I would say the Clinton election did not make me feel like democracy was broken. It made me feel like it was rigged,
Mm.
because it was very clear that, like, whoever was, had more, representatives in Congress could, push for certain agendas. Um, but I would say that the Gore v. Bush election is when I was like, "Oh, we're broken. We're broken."
Yeah. And
So,
then you get the Howard Dean scream, and if that existed today, who would
no.
care?
No, no one would
I
care,
think it would be a
right? Like, Trump
positive.
screams all the time. So,
I think it would be a
anyway,
TikTok dance.
so this goes to the
It
Supreme
would
Court,
be.
Yeah.
and then the Supreme Court, as we said earlier, decides along their party line, so it's a 5-4 decision. Um, this is after the, local government in Florida, so, like, the Secretary of State, Catherine Harris, and others, they're, like, not impartial in this process, like, they're Bush affiliates or Republican affiliates in some way. So there's been a heavy hand there the whole way through. And, then there were other interruptions that kind of set the tone for 2020 and beyond. The Brooks Brothers riots, where Republican staffers in their, fancy suits, I feel like if it were today, this would be like the Patagonia riot or something. Um,
Jeb Bush was governor of Florida at the time too? I
yes,
didn't
also
realize
Jeb
that.
Bush
Yeah,
was
you didn't
governor of Oklahoma.
realize that? Yeah, his
What?
fucking
No!
I
brother.
should have said that at the top. Yeah,
His
no, like,
brother was
his
the governor?
brother. Well, that's what, SNL was mocking all the time. It's like he's just gonna call up his brother to fix it, you know?
My favorite
Um,
It
political logo of all time,
Jeb.
period.
No,
Actually,
exclamation
exclamation mark.
point.
Yeah.
I think that we would have been so much better off if the older brother had been president.
The
What, if
number
he
of
hadn't
times
died?
I wish that Jeb had won in any of the elections he ran, and I'm not even a Republican, but it just
No.
Oh,
Mitt Romney,
I got the Bushes and the
call you
Kennedys mixed
boy.
up.
binders full of woman. I'd take the binders full of woman, honestly. Um, so the Brooks Brothers riot was a bunch of, Republican staffers storming right here in Miami-Dade County to stop the manual recount. Not dissimilar to people trying to stop the recounts in 2020 or storming the Capitol to stop the certification of the election on January 6th. Um, and then folks like Jesse Jackson got involved. And this is when Jon Stewart had been running before this point, but like this is where he really earned his stars and gained a larger following in Comedy Central because of his coverage of the process.
My dad is still mad to this day that he stopped when he did.
With Trump. Yeah,
Yeah,
I know.
that's rough.
I just feel like I was abandoned by my favorite uncle. That's all.
He does have great uncle. Also, he gives great. I remember talking about this with some of my friends in LA. I feel like Jeff Goldblum and Jon Stewart are like the most highly sought lesbian sperm for surrogacies.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
just saying, it's a thing.
Okay. That is a thing I didn't know I needed to know.
Listen, I'm
And
trying
the
to get
third
social
one
bits too,
and
Katie.
the third
Okay,
one,
yeah, I know.
Jeb
I've been
Bush.
too serious. I'm just talking about politics.
I
And there's
gotta put
definitely
in
both
some levity.
facts.
Tell me you wouldn't want a Jon Stewart baby.
I wouldn't want a Jon Stewart
I
baby.
But
would
you
I
don't
don't
want a
mm,
baby, so
Also that, but, like,
yeah.
it would be neurotic and short, and
how dare you?
I'm
Nature versus
sorry.
You just
nurture, though.
described me.
So finally, and this is, I think, a really important lesson for anyone who's looked at what's happened since. After the Supreme Court decision, Gore just was like, all right, I'm going to concede for the sake of the country and our democracy. It is what you do in this situation. I still wish he hadn't. Like, is there another world out there where he's still fighting the good fight? Maybe. But he calls and concedes for the good of the country in the same way, kind of like Nixon resigned before he could be impeached,
Mm-hmm.
and then was pardoned also for the good of the country. Like, let's try and bring people together rather than divide on party lines. This is not a thing that Trump knows how to do. So
No.
when this cycle repeated itself, we got January 6th instead. But there was a big emphasis in the rhetoric around a peaceful transfer of power and um, dealing with the legitimacy crisis of it. And I'm just having this flashback, and I want to tell you this like awful, terrifying thing about my history. So I had to write a entrance essay to the high school I went to. It was a private prep high school. And I
No one's
am
surprised.
writing this entrance essay. Let's see. I graduated high school 2005. So I'm writing the essay in early 2001, right? So that I can start in the fall of 2001. And my entrance essay is like this whole thing about the 2000 election. I need to see if I can still find it,
You
like
have
in
to
the
find
You
attic
that.
or
gotta
something.
find that.
So, and it was all about how the legitimacy crisis makes us look vulnerable to external states and
Whoa.
how, like, we were at risk of war and terrorism because of the Gore Bush election. And then the third day of school at the school that I got into on that essay was 9/11. And I just remember standing there being like, "The fuck?"
Are you Nosferatu? What is happening?
What does Nosferatu have to do with it?
Uh,
Do you mean
Nostradamus?
Nostradamus?
Sure. That's what I meant.
So, to wrap everything up, what I'm gonna say is don't vote third party. That's my takeaway. Chase, do you have a takeaway?
Um, we're fucked.
Ranked choice voting. Ranked
choice
choice
voting.
voting.
We love this.
Yes, you can. That way you can vote eighth party, and it's
Yes.
okay. Like
I was
ranked
gonna
choice.
say, I'm actually in favor of more than 2 parties, but not until we change our voting system.
Yes,
Also, screw the Electoral College.
the
My
official podcast stance is abolish the electoral college.
my takeaway is have a bug out bag.
Also that.
Well, that's
So
another episode of Once in a Generation. If you have memories of the 2000 election, or if you're like me and a lot of this was news to you, let us know in the comments.
You can find us at onceinagenerationpod.com. Follow us at social links in the description. And if you want to support the show, join us at Patreon for more additional content.
Thanks for unpacking the damage with us. We'll see you next episode with a special Thanksgiving show. And remember, if you think current elections are chaotic, at least we're not manually inspecting ballots for hanging chads anymore. Televised live on C-SPAN. At least not yet. Yet.
Yet.